Well, hello, Kim. How's it going?
Oh, good, Nick. It's not snowing where I am.
You mean not minus 40 with wind chill? Because
Oh my goodness. And for our Americans, the nice thing is I don't think we actually have to do the conversion because isn't it minus 40 in Fahrenheit is the exact same as minus 40 in Celsius?
you know it's cold when.
Like, how do you
Same
do the
temperature and
conversion?
funny
How, how,
units.
how does it work to be the exact same number? So there's an interesting tidbit for you. I believe it's minus 40 is the exact same in Celsius as it is in Fahrenheit.
If anybody wants to go and confirm that, they're welcome to.
Yeah, please let me know.
And thank you to anyone that's joining us for Virtual Selling Live today. When Kim brought this topic up, it had me instantly excited because so often people keep telling me the way to win in sales is to work harder and just get busy on the phone. Yeah.
I
Get busy
almost
on the
spat out my
phones
coffee.
doing better cold calls and doing better cold emails.
Mm,
Because if you're on social media, you are wasting time.
yeah.
And most of the books people are reading, most of the other training, if you look at where that stuff came from, I think it's fair to say most of it's from the 80s and 90s.
Oh,
Maybe some of the
totally.
email stuff, maybe early 2000s, but how much really is running that's 2010s or newer or 2019 and newer when the whole world flipped on us and we had to change?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I saw this really interesting meme and it says we're closer to 2070 than we are to 1970. And if you are going ahead and using technology, if you're building your sales process in the same way that you would have in the 70s, 80s, 90s, guess what, all you millennials, right? You're now getting close to middle age, right? That means that we're not building ourselves for where the future will be, but asking ourselves, how much longer will this Ford Pinto be able to run me until I get to a place where I have to like get rid of it? BlackBerry. Did you hear this story?
Yeah, on
BlackBerry
the 4th.
yesterday. The end of an era, right? And I want to hear from the chat how many people like BlackBerry was like their either their first phone or the first like I got it phone. Like for me, I remember being in university and like writing out like my wish list of all the things I wish I would have, and I'm like, I want to have a job where I have a BlackBerry because I thought that
I've
that
made
meant
it.
the pinnacle, right? That was the pinnacle of like being like cool business because now that means that I could type an email wherever I was. I didn't have to sit at my desk and type an email anymore. And that was for me that was everything. Now BlackBerry's no longer, right? Are you still using the sales technology and the processes that you did when you were using your BlackBerry, which was now officially dead technology, right? Never had one. Yeah.
It's fair.
Right.
I was thinking about day planners and Palm Pilots.
Yeah.
I used to
Oh,
love my
absolutely.
day. Remember when you got your first like professional portfolio and you like had your like card system in the front and you would go and put it in so you never missed your follow up and then you'd have all your different paperwork in there and you just felt like
Yes.
that selling machine. You're like, I can conquer the world. And then you got the Palm Pilot came around and you're like, I mean, it's all
With a
right here and it
stylist
fits
and you're
in my pocket. Like
yeah.
the world is now like I could take on anything.
Yeah. I remember being in my last sales career before we started KO Advantage Group, and LinkedIn was just starting to really kind of take off at the time, and I
Mhm.
remember opening it and having it open, and sales managers getting upset with us because we were spending too much time on social media. Right?
Mhm.
They're like, if you want to build business, you have to get out there. And we would actually have these things called 8 and 4s. You had to be in the office at 8 o'clock, right, and be out by 9. You had to be back in the office no earlier than 3:30, so that you were definitely in there by 4 o'clock. And as long as you were out of the office, and they didn't care where, right, going to visit clients, making your phone calls, anything else like this, that meant you were working. But don't spend your time on social media. Now,
And use
This
all of your expense account while you're out.
Yeah. If you were like, "Oh," until they told you that there was no expenses anymore, and then they restricted it, right? But the idea here was that if you were spending your time on social media, you were wasting company time, right? And they would actually get to a point like now I was fortunate that the companies I worked for never put those firewalls in place, but I knew there was other companies that did. They would put firewalls on social media because they said like we do not want you because you will end up getting too much time spending too much time in here, and that if you want to connect with your clients, the best way of doing that was to either phone them directly or get in person. But the research and all of the data now has completely changed. And what we're
Mhm.
seeing, like there was an article I posted. I think it was just before the Christmas break, maybe on the prospecting tools that work and the ones that are dying. And I actually submitted some statistics in there, specifically around the number of dials it now takes to get to one potential prospect. And I think the number off the top of my head, maybe somebody remembers seeing that statistic. I think the number was something like 10 or 12 or maybe even 18 dials. Like it was ridiculous. 18 dials just to get to one person who picks up, right?
Mhm.
Now, Nick, are you a call center?
No, no connect and sell here.
No, no. Are you an auto dialer?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, so even if we took the time associated with making those dials, right? I mean, like you can say, well, Kim, it's only a couple seconds. But guess what? You watch the seconds and the minutes will take care of themselves, right? And if you wanted to do 18 dials, I would have a hard time believing that anyone could actually dial a number 18 times without making a mistake, without accidentally dialing the wrong number, and it would take them even less than 10 minutes,
It's like they're gonna have
right?
a heart attack when somebody actually picks up too, because 'cause you're so shocked. And then now what do you say? Unless you're
Right.
running really tight segmentation where you're talking to the same personas with very similar companies, how do you add value?
Well, I mean, this comes down to the same conversation that we have when we get to proposals, because I say, well, how many proposals are you putting out before each client that says yes? And people will
Mm.
come to me and they're like, well, I put out 4 proposals, I put out 10 proposals, I put out 13 proposals, and I'm like, okay, great. How long does it take you to do a proposal? Right? Let's assume you're really fast at it and it takes you 30 minutes. Right? If you're doing 10 proposals for every client that says yes, you're spending 5 hours really creating a proposal that closes. Right? Now, if we take that same type of logic and we apply it to dials, just purely, we're not even talking about connecting with the client yet. We're just only talking about just dialing until you get to one person who's going to pick up. If you do 10 dials, right, or 18
Mhm.
dials, and it takes you about 10 minutes, if I went to you and I said, Nick, what did you do for the last 10 minutes? And you're like, I connected with one person who said no. Like that's the logic, right? It
You know
wasn't
what it
I
reminds
called
me of?
what's that?
Snail mail. Remember when we
Oh my
first started,
goodness.
when email was just coming in and we were actually writing our, snail mail and sending it out? I remember going to the post office with, like, one of those, banker's boxes and going and giving them the letters to go and send. And you know what's interesting? It came around where snail mail is actually working because it's personalized, hyper personalized.
Yeah.
What if cold calling is gonna become that,
Hyper personalized?
but very rare? And that's why it's gonna start. I think, anything when it's used in excess loses its effect,
Well, of course, yes.
right?
We've already seen this. Like
Mhm.
2020, like was a dramatic change. It was chorus.ai posted this study. You can go to chorus.ai, look at the resources tab, and there's a section in there that specifically talks about number of phone calls. And what it shows is on average, we saw the number of phone calls but in March, I think March it kind of stayed the same, but in April and May, dramatically go up. Like I think we're talking like 30 to 50% more dials than on average. And then what ended up happening, right? We actually saw the decrease in the number of connections go
Mhm.
down, right? We ended up spending more time dialing, less time connecting, right? And now that's a trend that has continued on, right? You're right. Anything in excess is going to continue. And what we're seeing is that now if we're spending so much time dialing, we're spending so much time trying to get to that connection point, right? If we're honest with ourselves and we say, how much time did I spend just dialing before I eventually got to one person? How much time did I spend just in phone calls before I eventually got to that one conversation that actually led to a meeting? Be honest with yourself. And if it's 3 or 4 hours, it doesn't matter how much more effective you are on the phone call if you're still wasting 10 minutes to get to one person and you have
Mm-hmm.
to spend 10 people in order to get to that one meeting, right? 10 times 10 is 100 minutes, 90 minutes, 1 hour and a half, an hour and a half to perhaps get to one meeting. Holy crap. Now, Nick, let's look at this as from an alternative point of view. What
Mm-hmm.
else could you have done with an hour and a half of company time?
So before, if you would have asked me this 6 months ago, I would have told you LinkedIn DMs is what I honestly what I would have told you.
Sure.
And then I realized that LinkedIn DMs have become the new cold call or cold
Oh, I
email.
will argue on that. I'm going to argue on that. I'm going to argue on that.
Okay,
Okay.
bring it.
But no, no, no. Okay, but what would you do with an hour and a half of company time?
Comment. I would do
Okay.
LinkedIn comments, and the reason being is that if they are posting, they are active. And you can
Mm,
even go on influencers' posts and comment on the people that fit your ICP or your personas and comment and start conversations. I find that I can go and get more exposure and talk to more people, meaningful conversations that are actually sales related or at least bring real value
yeah.
versus if I were to go on the phone, email, or even in DMs.
Yeah.
The reason why I stay away from DMs, and you actually, I think we talked about this before, and I agree, is if it's time sensitive. If there's
Yes.
something pressing, I like DMs
Yeah.
because then I can get hyper personalized. And so, like a new regulations coming in,
Yeah.
or I know that their quarter's ending. There's something pressing that is a week or less, or like I know that definitive timeline where it expires.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I go to comments because where most people are like, oh shit, I only talked to 5 people today. I'm like, cool. I talked to 5 people, 10 people, 20 people in the first hour of the day,
Yeah.
and then what I do is I stop talking and I go back to doing other work. By the end of the day, that 10 or 20 people has become 40 or 50 people because they start conversations. And so
Yeah.
later on, I get to rejoin the conversation and it feels good and it works.
Yes. Well,
So,
and that's where your DM can then take over, right?
mhm.
Because you've taken this very public conversation, like, and this comes back. We've talked about this before, and we have actually a lot of people are agreeing with you, so that's awesome. Nobody ever agrees with you, Nick. And now all of a sudden- and
Hey, I
now
thought
all
I
of a
gave
sudden-
you $20. You weren't supposed to say that out loud.
yeah. But now they're agreeing with you, and I agree. Like, if I spent an hour and a half, right? So if all else being equal, I spent an hour and a half making dials to eventually get to one phone call that led to one meeting, or I spent that same hour and a half commenting, direct messaging, having conversations, I would like that stuff. That's longevity, right? And I think that's the other thing that people need to take into consideration. When you comment on somebody's LinkedIn, how often does continue to resonate beyond the actual conversation? You're off doing other work, and your comment is sitting there and planting seeds and and people are checking out your profile, and they're like, what is this guy about? And they're following you, and they like, I don't know about you, but how many times have you ever had somebody that would comment on a comment of yours, and then all of a sudden you look in your notifications and they're commenting on two or three other of your posts?
Yep, liked a whole bunch of other posts, and the one on this thing, I on this train of thought. I have to mention this because this is a thing that you do not get with cold calls or emails anymore. And it's going to get even worse as the privacy tightens up
Yeah,
and we don't have the insight that we used to. Insight, or I don't even know if you'd call it insight, but access to information. But now you're commenting, now you're seeing all these different people. Now you get the opportunity to do market research while selling because now you're going to see what are they commenting on? What questions are they asking? Who do they trust and who do they talk to? What
yeah,
is the value that they're looking for?
yeah,
And so now you've done, this initial work for the first half an hour in the morning, 15
yeah,
minutes in the morning. Like you don't, and if you're using Sales Navigator and you have your lead list built, it is just work. You're not seeing all the other posts either. Like
yeah,
your sales manager can't even get you mad at you for this. Well, now you've done this market research and you have knowledge to come back later in the day and dive even deeper.
yeah.
What do you compare to that? I haven't found anything.
Like I love the opportunity to have these conversations. Like, as an instance, right? I was having a conversation. I was commenting. I think I commented on somebody's post, specifically. hmm, Oh, it was about demos, right? Should we have demos first as a first level meeting? And I put a comment in there about how a demo should never be a first meeting, that you should always have like a 15-minute or 20-minute introduction unless you're transactional. Right. And
Mhm.
that was kind of my caveat. Like, unless you're just like in and out, in and out, in and out, like I'm going to show you a demo, you're going to make a decision right then and there, and then, or you're out. Unless you're doing that, your demo should not be your first level interaction. And so I'm commenting on this person, and this other person starts to ask me a few questions, right? Well, like, what about this instance? And what about this instance? And so I replied back to him. And then in the morning, I ended up getting a request from somebody who said, I loved what you were commenting. I would love to be connected. Right now, in this instance, had I wanted to, right? And if the person's watching, like, it's not that I don't want to. Trust me, I would love to. It's just that we've been doing this for so long. We're like ridiculously like having a lot of conversations. But if I was a salesperson in this company, I would say, listen, Jim, thanks so much. How about we book a 15-minute phone call?
Mhm.
Right? And now that's where the DM actually happens. That, right? If I look at how much time I spent in the comments and how much time I spent, like, researching and everything else like that. I mean, what is that? 15, 20 minutes that led
Yep.
to a meeting, right? And probably a meaningful meeting versus an hour and a half of dialing. Like, there's a reason why we used to call it dialing for dollars, right?
Mhm.
Dial, 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 right? And you were talking about the automation point of this. Okay. Now, in the comments, let me know if you've seen this. Google actually took it away, right? There's only a few instances where you can find it on YouTube, and it's because people have actually copied it and posted it back on. But it was 4 years ago. Google started playing around with this technology called Google Duplex.
Oh
And
yeah.
Google Duplex was a bot that you would actually say, hey, Google, please make me a dinner reservation for two people at 7 p.m. at Leforto restaurant, Il Forno restaurant, right?
Mhm.
And you would leave it. The bot would then go ahead and call the restaurant and give you all that information. And this was like absolutely my Google's actually like opening up. It's like, what do you want me to do?
I think that was
But
the
this is
first time they said it passed the Turing test because it actually does proper speech pacing. Hey, I would like to go and book a reservation for 2. Pay
he
and
was
it
using
it actually
ums and
paces.
ahs.
Yeah, like it
Yeah,
you
and
couldn't tell.
there was, somebody had actually posted something on LinkedIn as well not too long ago about how they were actually cold called by the bot. They were cold called by the bot, not for sales purposes, but specifically to confirm their Google Maps information. And he says, we had a conversation for about a minute before finally the bot identified themselves as a bot. So if you think like, and I've been saying this for years, right? And I'm going to say this again, right? If you think cold calling is going to continue to be the sales conversations that you need to have, your alternative as a business owner and your competition for your role is now going to be a bot. Because
Mhm.
I can guarantee you that Google bot can make more dials, and can connect with more people in an hour and a half than you can.
Mhm.
So if you think that you are somehow going to be faster than a bot at that, you have another thing coming. And this is why, going back to our conversation, time wasters are on their phones, is that you are practicing a skill that if you don't consider it to be dead today, will be dead in the future. And I guess the big
But Kim,
question you want to ask,
Kim.
no, but Kims, no, but Kims, right? I think the question that you need to ask yourself right now is when. When do you think it's going to be dead? Because the answer is I promise you, is not going to be, well, never, right? Never is not, because that's what they said about the telegraph. And that is what they said about handwritten letters. And that is what they said about ICQ. Uh-oh. And AOL and all of these other
You
technologies.
got mail.
And you got mail, right? You got mail, right? I mean, there's even like conversations that is email dead, right? I mean, and I'm not going to go down that far, but at some point, the phone call as it is, as a cold call tool, is going to be dead. Because if you haven't done this already, right? And we were actually just working on this, I use an iPhone. Okay. Now, inside my iPhone, I have a setting in here, and if I actually go in, I can go to phone notifications. Okay. And I can actually do it. I'm actually going to show you how you can actually do this if you want to do this. And everyone's going to get really upset with me on here. But what you can actually do is you can actually go in here and you can silence unknown callers. So who do I want to receive a call from? So inside my settings in my phone, I can say, okay, do I want to call forward? Do I want to silence unknown callers? Do I want to call block notifications? Now, if you don't have this already, if you're already inundated with spam, I highly recommend you to do this, okay? Because spams are becoming spoofers. But what I have mine set at is, if it's not in my address book or it's not in my contacts, you're just sent to voicemail. And the only thing you get on my voicemail is something that says, "Hey, text me."
Mhm.
Text me. Right? Now, if you're for the same amount of time that I was spending dialing your number, Nick, I could have sent a text. And
Mhm.
I probably would have gotten better results out of the text than I would have gotten for, he didn't pick up. Right? Now what do I do? Right? And trust me, if anyone says, "Well, Kim, I get really good feedback from my voicemails." Uh-huh.
Yeah, did you get that voicemail I told you I was sending you an email?
Yeah, right. I actually, that was actually, I got that as a text message earlier this week. Somebody called me, right? And my phone automatically says, okay, it silences, is like, this isn't in your contact record. We're going to show you that this person called you, but we're going to silence it. And it's cool because I'm busy, right? And then he goes ahead and he sends me a LinkedIn DM to say, I left you a voicemail. I'm sorry, what? What? Why didn't you just use the DM to say, this is what I want you to do? Right? Or why didn't you send me a text message like my voicemail asks to do that? How much time? Like, I can promise you, I can write a text faster than I can leave a voicemail. Right? And if I can't, I can use voice to text. Yeah.
Mhm.
All
You
right.
can
We
copy
have
and
a great
paste if
comment
you
in
have
here.
a on the computer too. Like, there's so many different ways. But I think the one question I just want to ask, and please, anybody that's listening, I would love to get your thoughts. Are you selling the way you want to sell? It's the easiest for you, or are you selling the way that your buyers want to buy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I really want you to think about this. When you're on Amazon next, when you're
Yeah.
using Netflix, when you're on LinkedIn, when you're researching that next technology investment that you're going to make in your company, look at what you're doing. Ask
Yes.
yourself, was the first thing I wanted is like, God, I really wish somebody would have cold called me right now to go and educate me because I have no access to information to this, solve this problem. But
Mm.
you guys, think about this. Break it down. How are you making that decision?
Yeah.
Think about where you're getting stuck. Think
Yeah.
about where the friction comes in. Kim, we talk about this all the time. People say that they lose to competitors. The biggest competitor to every salesperson is the status quo, is
Yeah.
doing nothing, because the cost of doing something is more than doing nothing.
Yes.
And so think about this. Take the time. Do not rush through this. Your next major purchase, write every step down.
Oh, like if you were honest with yourself, such a great point, Nick. Like if you were honest with yourself, you would actually see that that's happening. We did this as a group activity last year. We did Jim Collins' Turning the Flywheel.
Oh, the flywheel.
Great book. It's highly recommend, but it's 40 pages, and I'm only halfway through it. It's a heavy book for so light. But one of the things that we noticed in that when we were looking at the Turning the Flywheel was we had to be honest with ourselves, and we had to say, where are our clients coming from? Right? When they like, because well, they show up to the contact us page, they download something. And the reality was that they weren't. Our first interactions with the vast majority of our clients were through LinkedIn. Were through, I had been following your content for a while. I liked what you had to say about that, and I started to follow you. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, we're not, yes, we're talking about sales training this aspect, but I don't care if you are talking about energy services, you are talking about manufacturing, you are talking about building custom software for companies. There is so much more that you can be talking about, and you have to be part of a conversation before that, because the way new buyers are buying is that they look at two things. Number one, they self-diagnose themselves, and they say,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I think I have as a problem, or this is what I think I need as a solution to that problem. And then they go ahead and they start to look that up. And then here's the second piece, and this is where a lot of people miss out on the conversation, and this is why it comes back to the idea that your sales managers think that you're wasting time on social media, is that you end up having a conversation, but you're not being self-promotional.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're not immediately going in and be like, well, you know what you really need? You need a Xerox copier, right? You know what would really solve your problems? Xerox and I'm not picking on Xerox here. I only worked for Xerox, and so I know exactly, like, what that looks like. But they're not doing that. They're having a conversation about work-life balance, about dogs in the office place, about mental health, about family time. And the reality is younger buyers want to buy from people, right? We do not compartmentalize Elon Musk away from Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
We look at them as the exact same company, right? Even though one is a company, and if we really got down to it, it's its own identity, and Elon, but they're the same. Right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't look at Mark Cuban away from the Dallas Mavericks, right? They're one and the same. And so when you're looking at what you want to talk about, you need to stand for something beyond just your product and service. And this
Mm-hmm.
is why, as a company, we had some big conversations about what else do we talk about, right? Beyond just sales training. Right, that is like, our MO, right? It's our modus operandus. That is why we are here to exist, is to help people get better sales process. But we want to talk about technology. We want to talk about the future. We want to talk about 4-day work weeks. We want to talk about environment. We want to talk about reducing business travel and becoming more efficient. And all of these things will fit in somehow inside the giant tree of the conversations that we have. But anytime somebody talks about a 4-day work week, we're there. And we're talking about that because that is part of our identity as a company. And oh, by the way, we also happen to talk about sales. So understanding what are, like, what are four things that you could also talk about beyond your product and service to get people to be like, I like what he has to say about that. Right. I believe in that. If you look at, let's take Elon Musk as a great example yet again. He doesn't just talk about Tesla, right? He doesn't just talk about SpaceX. What else does he talk about?
He talks about his category. He talks about the things that he stands for that make him highly referable. And the thing is, I think this is the new world, is you're not just referring your product and service or the company. Sometimes you're referring a really good idea,
Yeah.
or you're challenging the status quo. And
He's
this is
he's
what you get, right? This is what this allows you to do. Or before, we How many times have you got pulled aside by your manager and you're like, who you're talking to isn't somebody that's going to buy?
Yeah.
That's not relevant as much anymore because community doesn't
Ooh.
have to be exclusively your customers. It can be people that you can teach and will it actually spurs word of mouth, but you have to be very careful that you own a category and you're known for something and build that trust and value in your brand.
I think you have to be known for a couple categories, some that are revenue generating and some that are revenue supportive. Okay. And what I
Yep,
mean by
that's
that
fair.
is that, companies have to look at you and say, like, I'm going to fall. So when you look at Elon Musk, right, he promotes cryptocurrency. Right, he
Ye-
writes a lot about the crypto markets, and specifically like Dogecoin and like a little bit of Shiba, but he's not really into Shiba. But he talks a lot about crypto. Now, granted, he might be doing it for his own personal benefit, and he wants to like because he's such a large investor into Doge, he actually does want to like raise the price. Yeah, there's a personal interest in there, but from a business perspective, he's not a crypto company, right? They just accept it. And so he wants to talk a lot about that. He wants to talk about inhabiting Mars and what that will look like. He wants to talk about hyperloop, right? Which is like this is incredible because he came up with the idea. He allowed open access to it. He says, here's my notepad sketch. Anyone can have it because honestly, I don't have the time. Right. But just keep me involved in the conversation, and this is what like what he's been beyond. And I think as now you could do this as a company, right, or you could decide as each person individually, what do they stand for. Now they like when it comes to 4-day work weeks and environment, these are my personal things, right? But if anyone in my company also aligns with that, I want to encourage them to talk about that because we are so much more than the product and service that we sell. And we need to be a part of a lot of conversations that are not always self-promotional, but will lead to conversations, right? This is your original dinner party, right? Where I don't just ask you, Nick, what you do, and let's only talk about business. Let's talk about what you're interested in, what you stand for, where do you want to see the world become a better place? And then, oh, by the way, you know what? That was actually really good. We should continue talking more about business at
mhm.
some point. Okay. Oh, we got some great comments here already.
Which one do you want to start with?
Well, I mean, I think like you going from the top, like personal branding, yeah, right. I completely agree with this, right? And it's about like being known for something. I'm a big Hamilton fan. I'm a big Lin Manuel Miranda fan. If anyone has not watched Encanto yet, definitely watch it. I think that Lin Manuel Miranda definitely gets better with experience and with age. This guy, if anyone can introduce me to him, I will be fangirling like all over. But yes, right? Like, so one of the things in Hamilton, one of the famous lines that they do in Hamilton is he says, if you stand for nothing, what will you fall for? And I love that, right? Because this is beyond just your product and service. This means like what are those mountains that you're willing to die? And they can be superficial. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with deciding that you are the person that will forever say that Fleetwood Mac Rumors album is the best album of no time of all time and there will never be another album. Then fine. Make that your mountain and find every conversation where you can associate yourself with that, right? Or choose something else, right? But nobody is going to come to us and ask us to like monetize a 4-day work week, right? That's a great idea, Kim. How do you monetize that, right? This is typical your business coaches that are out there. How do you monetize that? And it's like, well, you don't, right? You can still have the conversation. And oh, by the way, we're doing it in this industry, right?
And
And
to
I'm
be
happy to
clear,
have.
this is still a strategy.
This is still a strategy.
So many
Yes.
people tell me this is not a strategy. It is. It's an indirect strategy. And direct strategy has different ways of tracking. So think about how you're allocating your time and energy to direct strategy and indirect strategy.
Yes.
Personal brand is indirect. And what you're doing is you're building trust in a market where people trust you so that if you call them, it eases that conversation for your direct strategy.
Yes. And how you do this specifically on social is you can follow hashtags. Okay. And by following the hashtags beyond just hashtag sales, which I think has 5 million followers, how do you stand out at a 5 million follower hashtag, right? I can actually follow hashtag 4 day work week, which I think has 300,000 followers, right? And when I'm active in that hashtag, right, I become a subcategory, right? That now I'm going to filter in. Instead of trying to stand out, if I was document services or manufacturing or oil and gas or IT support, whatever my industry is, and trying to instead of trying to stand out in a very crowded arena, try to find these subcategories where here's something else I will speak on, and then out of that, somebody's going to want that.
It's
So
an interesting. You want to go and jump into this question?
yeah, and actually, I think we want to save some time for questions too, right? So yes, feel free to ask any questions you want on either how should phone calls be set up inside a sales cycle. Because it's don't get me wrong,
There's still a place.
I'm not promoting that phone calls are dead. I am promoting that using the phone call as a first interaction is dead,
Hmm.
right? A phone
Agreed.
call as a first interaction should never be a strategy, right? That is, I'm going to take a bunch of darts and throw them on a bunch of dartboards and hope something is going to stick. Feel free to ask questions around either social media strategy, how to get those conversations, who you should converse with, and how to have those conversations. But yeah, let's go ahead and see some of those questions that we have so far.
Got this one right here. How many sales are made by word of mouth based on relationships versus cold calling? LinkedIn is where you turn cold calling into referrals.
Mm, Is it though? Right? I don't know. Like, I mean, and this is a good comment. So I'm a big believer in referrals. Right. And I think it was Salesforce did a study. And this is like it's an older study now. It's like 5 years old or 6 years old or something. But they said like 89% of deals, or you have an 89% chance of closing a deal if it starts off a referral. Right. Like that's incredible. Right. Like,
Hmm.
you almost have it like a slam dunk in the bucket. So referrals are fantastic. However, I don't know if you can necessarily go to a phone call and without because you have such a limited amount of time on a phone call to establish enough trust with somebody for them to feel like that trust can easily be transferred to someone else within their network. Right, because
Hmm.
that's essentially what a referral is. I trust you. I'm willing to gift you this trust by giving it to someone else and asking for that conversation. Okay. Now, I do ask for referrals. And one of our strategies is inside any type of sales engagement that we have that does not lead to a next meeting, because everything should be leading to next meeting. If it doesn't lead to a next meeting, we still get it to lead to a next meeting because I ask, hey, Nicholas, who else do you know that could use, this type of sales conversation? Or who else do you know that is really struggling with navigating LinkedIn as part of a lead generation network? Right? Do you mind introducing us via email?
Hmm.
Right. But that has to happen through once we have a meeting, not through a first interaction. And regardless, whether we're talking about phone call, direct messaging, LinkedIn, social media, I would have a really hard time in a very first interaction, right? That was like, under 5 minutes, asking someone to be willing to transfer that trust right away.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question you need to ask with this is what's your timeline? Because if your timeline is 30 days or less, you
Yeah.
won't see it. If your
Yeah. Yeah.
timeline is 90 days or less, you might
Yes.
start to see it.
Yeah.
And if you want to challenge me on this, if you post every day for a year that is high value to your category, I bet you $10,000 that you'll get word of mouth.
Oh,
If you're
definitely.
consistent. The thing
Definitely.
is, where this fails is people compare it to cold calling and emails where they expect instant gratification
Yeah.
and they want it to happen right now. You have to go and think about it like allocating your investment portfolio. You have some that is that long burn that happens later, big deals, you just let it consistently grow. You have some stuff that is kind of in the middle, and then you have some stuff that's really high risk that pays off right
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
You have to allocate like an investment portfolio when you're talking about how you're going to market and how you're calling, how you're emailing, how you're using all these different methods. You can't put it all in one basket. That is like
Oh,
investing 101, but
yeah,
everybody keeps talking about cold calling,
yeah,
emailing, social selling.
yeah,
Why one?
yeah,
Why
absolutely.
why why do we have to pick? And
It's
the question
it's
is,
the instant gratification.
yeah, and what
But
about your
there's no
customers?
gratification. There's no because well, like it's like majority of salespeople hate phone calls, right? Like why would you ask somebody to do a job that they absolutely hate? Unless you're planning on like, unless they're like, a low I don't know, like a low product, right? I mean, yeah, I guess there's people that would do anything for any money. But I mean, I want my people to love their job. I want them to love the work they do, right? And I don't want to take this into like, an employment conversation, but in all honesty, for companies that are struggling with retention, yet again, be honest with yourself. Do your employees love the work they do?
It doesn't
And if
matter,
they
Kim. They just need to work harder, dial more. Well, we can replace them. They're easy to replace. They're
Oh
just a
my
number.
goodness. I'm gonna post. I saw this great little video. It was Gary V chatting with somebody, and this guy stands up and he talks about. He's like Gary. He's like nobody wants to work. He's like, what's the problem? He's like, am I the problem? And Gary's like, yes. And the guy's like shocked, and he's like, no, seriously, you're the problem. If nobody is working for you, you're the problem. And he's like, so you need like be honest with yourself and ask yourself, what are you actually asking them to do? And if it's not work that you yourself would be willing to do, who do you know that is willing to do it? Now, there's a
Mhm,
difference between capability, like being able to have the capability to do that work, and wanting to do the work, right?
mhm.
And there's a lot of things inside my company that I definitely am not an expert at. I am definitely not capable of doing it. But would I want to do it? Would I believe in it? Yeah, right. And like and that's the big difference. So yes, right. Like I mean, you need to look at those long term. This is and you make a great point about social media, right? You need to look at it for what it is. It is not a one and done thing. It is a longevity thing. And what you need to do is if you're hiring a salesperson for the very first time, set them up for success. Ask them from day one to make sure that they have their profile set up, that they are personally branding themselves. Like even ask them, say, like, on top of talking about our company and our business, right? Because it's going to take you a while to get product knowledge. Let's be honest.
Mhm.
What are the conversations that you're going to have online? Right? What are the hashtags that you're going to be following for? Challenge them. They probably haven't put any thought or strategy behind it. And if you say, well, I don't know, cool. That's a good plan, new employee. I hope that works out for you. Right? Say, well, okay, but spend the next 3 days and ask yourself what are three topics, even if it's not specifically related to what we talk about. What are three topics that you are passionate about and you're willing to talk about? And I don't care if it's Lord of the Rings, if it's music trivia, or
Ruin
if it's
beer.
yeah, right, brew and beer. Like I don't care, right? But you stand for something. Just you know, don't be a donkey about it, right? We don't want people like
I'm gonna tie in this, question, Kim, because this goes really well with this.
yeah,
Anton asks, "Do you think this is all possible without LinkedIn?" Yes,
yeah,
but the thing is, we gotta remember, Anton, that there are community hubs. These hubs have just evolved over time as access became more available.
yes,
Social media is just the internet. It's the internet. It's an internet hub for people like-minded to come together. So you need to look. This is where the hardest research you'll ever do is you need to look at who your customers trust and where they go for information and how they research before they buy.
yeah,
And so what are those hubs? What are those information, those sources that they seek out when they're making those tough decisions, and you need to show up there consistently. And this is where so many people get it wrong. You don't need to show up just before, you just need to show up before. If you're
yeah,
just before, you haven't built up enough trust and value and authority in that market for them to seek you out and trust you. And this is how that word of mouth comes in, making those investments every day into posting.
yeah.
So
And
look at
and you're right. It doesn't have to be on LinkedIn.
no,
Right? It can be
YouTube,
it we
Slack.
talked about forums. So
Mhm.
Slack groups, right? Find the
Medium.
Slack groups that you want. You could find other social media, like, such as Twitter, such as TikTok, Reddit, Quora. I mean, where else, like, could you find, like, even, I'm part of a couple private forums, so I have a couple paid like paid memberships that I'm a part of, and I'm actively promoting, all sorts of different conversations. How do you hire salespeople? What are, like, how
Mhm.
compensation plans? Just where is your knowledge base beneficial to the conversation, right? And then if you, yes, like, stand for something, be promotional about some of the things that don't monetize your conversation, but at least people are going to follow you. People follow interesting people. And if you are a one trick pony, if you are one conversation all the time, you sound really monotonous, and nobody follows monotony. What they follow is conversations. Like there's a reason why we all know so much about Elon Musk, even though none of us have ever met the guy, right? He's not just Tesla. He's so much more. There's a reason why we know so much about Bill Gates, even though he no longer runs Microsoft. He talks about so many different projects and passions that he has, right? There are things that you are passionate about. Be passionate and be interesting. People will follow interesting people. If you want people to be interested in you, be interesting. That is it.
By now, by now, by now, by now. Look at how great we are. By
Yeah.
now, by now, by now.
Yeah.
And
There's nothing
it,
interesting about buy now.
and this ties really well into this conversation. And it's, do you need to tune your personal branding with the values and norms of the company?
Ooh.
And I'm just going to go and hide it here because I think it. Oh no, that's the whole thing. Like it is your personal story or indirect your company story.
So
Would you like to start?
do you need to tie it in? Yeah, you go ahead and start. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think you need to a certain degree. The thing is, when you're trying to attract somebody to a company, it's no different than you're trying to attract a prospect to come buy from you. And you need to think of what is the value that you're creating together. If honestly, if you're not creating any value together working for a company, it's not a good fit. If you're just there for the money, there's better opportunity. And so your personal brand is a lever that is leveraged by the company brand. And if your story aligns so well with, like, I tell people all the time, the reason why I'm in sales and the reason why I like sales training and really focus on diagnosing the problems is my parents still don't think I can make a living selling. They hate the fact that I'm in sales and it bugs them. And they don't want to ever talk about it with me because they think that I'm a used car salesman. And I want kids to tell their parents that they want to be in sales, and I want them to be proud because it's
Yeah.
like accounting, law, a doctor, because it can be as big or as little as you want it to be. The only problem with sales is too many companies force you to be into survival mode with their
Yeah.
variable comp plans and their lack of support.
Yeah.
And so who's to blame? The salesperson that's hungry and is trying to put a roof over their head, or the company that's treating them like a number and an asset where if they don't perform, they chuck them out. So you got to
That's
really
that's
think.
almost a topic for, like, another day. Like, I would love to dive into why salespeople fail.
Yeah.
Just as a central topic. Like, put in the chat if you want to hear that as, like, a topic. Like, why are salespeople failing? So Astrid, I love your question about, does it tie into personal branding? So I believe I'm with you, Nick, that it doesn't have to tie into what the company is, but there has to be value alignment,
Mm-hmm.
and you cannot be both sides of the coin, ultimately. So for instance, you can't go ahead and work for a company that, believes in, that believes in efficiency, cost control and complete automation, and at the same time, we believe in people first, giving, flexibility, like they almost, and granted, I'm sure there's examples of companies that have that, right? And that's fine, right? understand where that balance is. But if it's a tipping point, right? You can't say both. You can't say, listen, we believe in charitable contributions and everything, and this in charitable contributions, and we believe in maximizing profits at all cost. Right? Those are completely misalignments.
We believe in
Right?
innovation and cost control. Innovative cost control.
Innovative cost control. We believe in investing a ton in research and development, but at the same time cutting all costs except for the absolute critical. And it's like, well, then where does research, like, is research and development cost critical? Like, and if it is, like, how do you determine that? And that's fine. It's fine to be controversial, but be very clear in how that balance alignment is, and be okay with a yes or no answer, right? Where people get really lost is the maybes. Well, maybe, 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 maybe. Like, think about the politicians that you absolutely hate. The ones that all of us, I'm sure, can agree on, the politicians that we absolutely hate are the middle of the fencers. The ones are like, well, yes and no, and yes and no, and yes and no. And
It
it's like,
depends.
yeah, and it depends. And I'm going to give you a big run around and not actually give you an answer. But the ones that, like, people follow, whether you follow them or not, are the ones that are divisive. The ones that say no, yes. And you're like, oh my, that's so different. That's so different. I want to follow the person that at least says yes or no, right? And yet again, going back to Lin Manuel Miranda's quote, right? If you stand for nothing, what will you fall for? Right? What will you fall for? Right? So stand for something, use your personal brand, use that conversation, be passionate about it. But it doesn't mean that you have to, like, completely, eliminate everybody.
I think we
So,
may have time for one more question, then we're
oh,
going to wrap up. Does
yeah.
anybody have a burning question that they just need answered right now while you got
And
Kim live?
And I think we have a vote here for on why salespeople fail. So we're going to have to add that
Next
on
week?
to. Is it going to not next week? I think it might have to be the week after.
Oh, yeah. We have a guest next week.
Yeah.
We're going to change
So
it up on you guys.
yeah, we're bringing on guests on occasion. So yes, if you ever want to give us your opinion, how do you have you developed your own sales process? What are some of the changes that you have? Maybe even questions, right? Maybe you actually want to just, like, have us, like, deep dive into your own sales process. We're inviting guests onto the show, so just DM Nick and say, I would love to be a guest on an upcoming show. We would love to have you, because the more people we have in these conversations, the
The better.
greater and the more color we create around what does it ultimately mean. There's no definitive answer, and we want to hear from all of you.
Can I go and just address this as considered our last question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. It says LinkedIn user, so I just want to thank you for mentioning this because it's so critical. Now tie this into your social prospecting efforts. Find out what your prospects believe in and appeal to that when interacting with them on social media. This highlights something that is an epidemic in sales, marketing, and customer success, all RevOps. And
Yes.
that is people do not know enough about customers in general.
Yeah.
They run off archetypes that are these, you know, random associations that literally mean nothing. And people use like, oh yeah, they're 5'10" male with tattoos on one arm and dressed like a hippie and
Did you see that meme that was like, born in England, 50 years old, and they showed two people, and one of them was Prince Charles, and the other one was Ozzy Osbourne. Did you see that one?
no.
And they're like, if you think this is your same demographic, right? I'll have to find it. I'll post it on social. Yes, it was,
And
but you're right, right? Like, there's so much more. There's so much more. And this is I think where people think automation is going to help you do this at scale. It's the opposite, right? It allows you to dive in deeper. Like, instead of trying to build a 1-inch trench a mile as fast as possible, automation should help us to develop, like, to build 1 inch depth, 1 inch but a mile deep, right? But
mhm.
lots of them, right? And
Mhm.
that's where we want to get to. I want to have 5 people fitting in here, 10 people fitting in here, 20 people fitting in here, as opposed to how do I get 10,000 people who will only go an inch deep with me, right? I
How
want,
do you have that same conversation with people? How do you have it so people think that you're like, "Wow, how does this person know me so well?"
yeah,
That never happens when you're talking to thousands of different people. That only happens, you only get the trend analysis where you're just like, "This is weird." Like that beautiful mind, like, are you seeing this? Like,
yeah,
it's all the same, like, it's all the same people, like, they keep saying the same thing."
yeah.
Only happens when
But
you're
thanks to
talking to the
Eileen.
same type of people. Huh?
Sorry, I see Eileen. So thank you, Eileen, for being a part of the conversation. Right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Astrid, Joe, Anton. Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful to have so many of you. Jenny, I see your name listed on there, and Caitlin. It has been a wonderful conversation yet again.
Thank you, everyone. Please, if you think of any guests you'd like us to have on, DM me. If you have any burning questions you want me to go and ask Kim next week, let me know. And have a great day.
Go
Happy
sell some.
selling. Bye.